Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of Jig Retro, where we're going to take a look at my personal top 10 favourite SEGA Megadrive games. This was a video game console that I owned, and to be honest, to just pick 10 games from this console that I have absolutely huge nostalgia and love for was always going to be a struggle. So please stick around to see what made the cut. If you enjoy this episode, then please take a moment out of your time to like, share, subscribe and check out my back catalogue of videos. Sharing ownership of this console with my big brother meant that I was exposed to a huge variety of video games in the initial run of us owning the console. We were both stunned by the huge technological advantages of the Mega Drive over the previous system that my brother owned in the Commodore 64. Although I've played a good amount of this video game console's library nowadays, I do feel that that huge pull of nostalgia is what is represented in this top 10 today. There's going to be a lot of omissions in this list that will polarize people, but this is just a snapshot of the most treasured time in my video game history all in all. So let's get to it. This is Jig Retro's top 10 SEGA Mega Drive games of all time. Number 10, Quackshot. This was one of the very early titles that we owned when we first got the Mega Drive console, alongside Castle of Illusion. And although I can now happily, comfortably breeze through Castle of Illusion and really enjoy it, I have more nostalgia and certainly more play hours put into Quackshot. I think the more adventure aspects to the game are easier for young players than the more traditional platforming of the Mickey game. I absolutely love the mechanic of the plunger gun and its upgrades, which allow you to scale walls or catch a flight on a bird, and I really appreciate the Indiana Jones adventure style influence. Number 9, Mortal Kombat. This game was really a shock to the system when my brother picked it up back in the day. And despite the Super Nintendo version having better graphics and sound, I've always found its controls sluggish compared to the Mega Drive version. Let's face it, having the blood cheat, which is still ingrained into my brain, AB, AC, ABB, instantly disregards the SNES attempt in my opinion. Everyone tells me that playing this with a 6-button controller is a must, but honestly, I kind of just get the 3-button layout. It's definitely how I'm used to playing it, and playing it today in the arcade, I still get a bit confused. I still remember how to bust out a few fatalities, and doing so on my friends is as satisfying as ever. Number 8 is NBA Jam. This is a game that I actually don't have much nostalgia for, but it's made it into this top 10 list on its sheer quality. I believe that this is one of the earliest examples of the over-the-top arcade sports title, which has spawned so many others such as NFL Blitz, NBA Street and the such like. Iconic commentary. He's on fire! A simplistic 2-on-2 arcade style take on the sport that I think absolutely anyone can get into. Number 7, Road Rash, the originator of the vehicular combat racing game. What could have been a by-the-numbers motorbike racing game is brought to life with an underground illegal racing scene, punching and kicking rivals off bikes, stealing batons to inflict even swifter damage, and avoiding other motorists and police. As much as the inclusion of the split-screen 2-player racing and a few more weapons leads people to the second game in the series, I find the difficulty curve and balance much better in the original game. Number 6, Dragon's Fury. This one has kind of a funny history to it for me. In that one day, my dad just turned up with this game, and to be fair, my dad didn't have the best track record for choosing video games for us. Nevertheless, we were always grateful, even with zany golf. With that said, he chose an absolute banger here. Little did we know that this Tengen pinball game was a port of the successful Crush series of games, which were popular on the PC Engine console. It's honestly one of the best pinball games that you can get your hands on. A banging soundtrack, an evil satanic art style, albeit edited down from its original release, and a highly playable experience all round. The best way to rack up points is to get to the top of the main table and complete as many of the bonus rounds as possible. This is just one of those games that I can pop in the console at any moment for 30 minutes to an hour of pure enjoyment. Number 5, Revenge of Shinobi. This is a game that I've only recently fully played. I was never really into it as a younger gamer. I think its difficulty was a big put off. I only ever got as far as the first boss back in the day, but recently I made it a mission to beat it, and I seriously loved every bit of it. Well, except that labyrinth style final stage before the final boss of the game. That was a real cheap way to lengthen an otherwise flawless title. Learning the best ways to deal with the enemies as well as bosses, and discovering the best time to use which ninjutsu attack is where the true depth of this game lies. Graphically stunning for an early Megadrive title, and the legendary Yuzo Koshiro soundtrack is at least on par with his best work. The original release of this game saw versions of Spider-Man, Batman, Godzilla, Terminator, Jackie Chan and Rambo, and I find the lack of respect for other people's IPs to be hilarious. Definitely not something that would happen nowadays. This game is a real recent addition to my top 10, but it deserves its place so much. Number 4, NHL 94. This is really just one of those games that I enjoyed playing because my brother enjoyed playing it. I've never really been into ice hockey or followed it as a sport, but solely as a multi-platform competitive video game, this game is amazing. Easy to pick up but tricky to really excel. The introduction of the one-timer, which is an authentic hockey move, really gave you huge satisfaction when scoring against your opponent. This would make it near the top of my favourite sports games of all time, for sure. And I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one to think so, because in a very rare move for the company EA, they've re-released this and made it available on the Xbox. There's yet to be a better ice hockey game than this really, in my opinion, although I do enjoy the over-the-top thrills of the NHL hit series by Midway. Number 3, Micro Machines. This really is the best competitive racing game for the system, and it's just magical in its simplicity. Learning the tracks off by heart, knowing when to give your opponents a little nudge in order to send them flying, as well as knowing when to slam on your brakes in order to avoid such moves from them. The simplified and graphical style, as well as the racing tracks built around breakfast tables, school desks, and a pool table, really make you feel that they've come from the imagination of a kid playing with these micro toy cars. Believe me, the competitiveness gets very real in these games. I personally have most nostalgia for the first game in the series, but an argument could definitely be made for the second game in the series being the best. Number 2, Streets of Rage 2. There's nothing really that I can say about this game that hasn't already been said. Simply the greatest side-scrolling beat-em-up ever in my opinion. This game practically on its own was the answer for anyone who owned a Mega Drive in an argument over the better console. God-level techno-style soundtrack from Yuzo Koshiro, more moves than traditional games in this genre thanks to a great little grapple mechanic, stunning graphics and large arcade-esque sprites. 4 unique feeling characters, a perfect sequel to an already genre-defining game. Here are my honourable mentions for this list before we make our way to number 1. Earthworm Jim 2. This is just one of those games from my childhood that I really enjoyed. It'll never leave my collection despite admittedly not picking it up and playing it recently. Fantastic sprite work, ridiculously funny and endlessly entertaining. This game was brilliant. Sonic 2. This game needs no introduction, my favourite game from the series and actually the one that I've beaten without cheating. I feel that this is the best balanced game in the series. I just didn't want to take up a spot in this list for such an obvious choice, but it undoubtedly deserves a spot or at least a mention. Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition. This game had a huge impact on me back in the day. The best competitive beat-em-up from the arcade, getting such a faithful port to home consoles was a massive deal. I still remember going to pick up this game and due to a mislabeling in the shop that said £25 instead of 25% off, meant that I was able to pick up the essential 6-button pad which made this game so much better. With such an iconic game, inevitably there are so many ways to play this classic nowadays that it has diluted its relevance to the Mega Drive, which is why I decided not to have it on the list, but its impact should not be understated. And finally, Xeno Crisis. This modern release for the trusty old SEGA Megadrive is phenomenal. It's so incredible that games are still being released every now and then for this wonderful game console, and for me, Xeno Crisis is the absolute best so far. An amazing soundtrack, randomly generated level design which never gets old, Smash TV style twin stick gameplay, and a stunning Neo Geo-esque style to its graphics. This is such a rewarding pick up and play and thrillingly challenging title. This can be picked up digitally for all modern systems and I can't recommend it enough. So finally, here it is. Number 1 is Flashback. And despite being released on many other systems, I do think that the SEGA Mega Drive version is the best. I feel that this game has held up the best as far as goes any other game on the system. It could be released as an indie title right now and I'm sure it would still be highly praised. This is a much longer story-driven sci-fi cinematic action-adventure style game, which is not really the norm for the Mega Drive's arcade-style game roots. I have huge nostalgia for playing this game back in the day, and despite my novice skills, I still appreciated it for its stunning for the time cinematic cutscenes, story, and the science fiction pop culture influences. I also really enjoy how the main sprite Comrade ran, jumped and pulled his gun, which were all animated using rotoscoping techniques. This gave it a level of realism. Learning how to best approach the enemy was always exciting. In later years I got round to investing some proper time in beating this game, and I have to say it's my favourite game for the system and almost certainly in my top 10 video games of all time. Flashback made it into the Guinness World Records as the best selling French video game at the time. I'm honestly not sure if that record still holds. As you can tell in this video, I have a huge passion for the Sega Megadrive. And actually, looking into this top 10, I could tell that some of the games that I've mentioned, I've also done previous videos on. So please, for a more in-depth look at some of these games, check out my back catalogue. With that said, I'm still glad to have the opportunity to really take an in-depth look at my collection and the back catalogue of the Megadrive to put together my top 10. Please comment down below if you think there are any glaring omissions. I always like to discover new video games for the system, and maybe some of them will make it into the future top 10 Megadrive games, similar to how Revenge of Shinobi did recently. Until next time, much love, please look after yourselves and each other and get your geek on with Jig Retro.